get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Ian Ash of Dig Insights and Upside. And Ian, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And so, when I look at some of the top agencies, this is kind of top SaaS and top agencies in the same respect. Top SaaS, Mailshake was a really good one, how they've grown to over like 70,000 customers and they've been doing acquisitions. Zapier was a good one. I had one of the founders of Zapier on, Wade Foster, talking about their evolution and their journey. From an agency perspective, I had Jason Swank on, who built up his agency to over 8 figures and sold it, and then has been buying up agencies. He also is an agency group. And then Todd Taskey was another good one. He's got the Second Bite podcast, and he basically matches agencies with private equity to help sell agencies. So we talked about the agency space, valuations, how sometimes people made more on the second bite than the first, actually, when they sold it. So that was also interesting as well. Check out more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, accountability, and the full execution. Ian, we call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they can create great content and amazing relationships. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on, so we can all learn from them. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com to learn more. I'm excited to introduce Ian Ash. He's co-founder of Dig Insights, and they have the platform Upside, which we're going to talk about. He's the chief strategy officer, where he leads the development and adoption of their proprietary SaaS platform. We're going to talk. Upside is, by the way, spelled UPSIIDE. And Dig Insights has approximately 250 staff across Toronto, Chicago, London. Ian, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. Yeah.
Just start off and talk about Dig Insights and what you do. When I go to your page, which I'll pull up in a second, I see McDonald's, I see Hershey's, I see big companies. What do you do at Dig Insights?
So we're a customer insights consultancy. So we'll run proprietary or surveys for those companies, doing a variety of things, everything from testing new concept ideas to tracking brand equity, to tracking the impact of innovations they've had, claims testing, price testing, runs the gamut of what a full service market research company would usually do. And then on top of that, we've built a lot of proprietary technology, including Upside. Yeah, so this is Upside. So this is our SaaS platform. So this can be either fully serviced by our market research staff on your behalf, or it can be used on their own as a DIY, and then we roll out programs across companies. So some of the companies you mentioned, for instance, like Coca-Cola uses us globally within their innovation funnel to test early ideas.
I don't know if you say maybe holy grail is too strong, Ian, but like from an agency, having a SaaS portion is kind of a holy grail. So talk about that service to SaaS transition.
Absolutely. So we were founded in 2010, and we were a full service market research company. And we right away sort of specialized in the very complicated. Our original tagline for Dig was complex question, clear answers. And we focused on very complicated trade-off methodologies, conjoint, discrete choice, that sort of thing, and predicting the results of changes that would happen that would impact their market success. And we grew that very quickly, and we began to see a polarization in the market happening, where in the middle were the traditional market research firms like the Ipsoses, the Cantars, they're still around, the multi-billion-dollar companies, and they were productizing fairly simplistic methods, and pushing them out. The same questions were asked over and over again, that sort of thing. There's a bunch of reasons for that beyond just it being efficient and scalable, but that's what they were doing. And then there was the new entrants, and so the new entrants being companies like Qualtrics, who you may have heard of, who sold eventually to SaaS for, I believe it was $8 billion. Actually, I have the number somewhere, but and we saw a quick rise in that. And so at the time, the darling in Canada was Vision Critical. There was Qualtrics. There's a whole bunch of these SaaS platforms, automated methodologies that were eating the lunch of the Cantars and the Ipsoses. We stood a little bit further towards the analytical spectrum of that, and we're competing more with like the Bains, the McKinseys, for that really high-end, complicated data science work, in addition to customer insights work. But we saw that there was a big opportunity there in more scalable methods, but we weren't going to be able to do it just by doing fully serviced, productized methods, because that was sort of disappearing. And that's why we decided, all right, we're going to have to build our own technology, which of course we had no idea how to do, and we're completely out of our depth. And so that was a really hard learning curve. Everything from you notice the name Upside with two eyes, and that the reason why we did that was because we originally were a native app in the Apple App Store, and we couldn't buy Dig because it was already taken, and we couldn't use Upside with one eye, already taken. And so we went with Upside, and then of course everything sort of evolves and changes over time. And now we're a web app, and we're no longer in the App Store. But that's sort of where it all sort of started.
Talk about that decision. Then, what did you have to? Because it is a huge decision.
Yeah.
You're diverting resources, people, energy, time. What were some of those steps that you took in the beginning? And take me through a little bit of the evolution of starting up this SaaS within the company. I may remember, MailChimp, I believe, started as an agency, and they were doing email, and then they created the MailChimp, which I think sold for whatever billions of dollars as well. So,
right.
What did you do first to go on this SaaS journey?
Well, first we had the idea, and we realized that there was a couple of gaps in the way that market research was being done. At the time, when we first came out with Upside, most surveys were still written to be conducted on desktop or laptop computers, but the majority of people who started surveys did it on their smartphone. So people were interacting with technology in an inefficient way, and not the way they wanted to take surveys. So we said, okay, first of all, if we're going to do any technology, it's got to be mobile first, because that's how people want to actually answer surveys. And the big platforms at the time were not catered that way. And then secondly, we said, if we're going to be on mobile, let's make sure that the way that people are interacting with our app is exactly how they like to interact with mobile. So that's why we use the swiping interface. And so the way quickly that Upside sort of works is you're shown a bunch of ideas. Now, we also have all the other questions that you would have in a regular survey, but you're shown ideas, and you swipe left and you swipe right on those ideas. And then after you've swiped on a series of ideas, the one that you like most, the ones you like most are then put in a head-to-head tournament style. And so what we're actually able to do from that data is create not only a hierarchy of which ideas are best, but we actually can also run what's called HB modeling in the background and create share of choice. So we can say, if you, I'm going to turn that off. If you were to put this product in market, how incremental or cannibalistic would it be to your portfolio, and where would it take its market share from? Just from this very simple interface. Now, you're seeing other questions here, like this emoji question. So it's
yeah, people are listening to the audio. There is a video piece, and we are looking at the kind of the interface here.
Sorry, yeah. So all I was going to say was that since that launch, which was all it was at the beginning, was that the swiping, it's evolved a lot, and now we have a whole series of, just everything you can do in a regular survey, like a Survey Monkey or something like that, is available through the platform as well. But what it holds true to is that everything we do, we always have some very cool analytics that we run in the background and then provide within the platform. And we actually have provisional patents on some of the algorithms that we created to do that, because we were a highly analytical company to begin with.
So you said, no, it evolved, right? And you said first it was mobile. Now, how did that original conception evolve to what it is now?
Well, we originally put it in the App Store, like I said, and we quickly realized that the economics of a mobile app just weren't making sense. And so, without getting into a lot of tedium around the way that our category works, you need to keep a panel of people interested in taking your surveys, you need to have a lot of surveys. And so we were forced to run a lot of studies through Upsiide that was on the App Store, so that we can keep people engaged and keep our monthly average user number high. But in many cases, those weren't necessarily sold projects at the beginning. And so you kind of have those network effect issues almost with anything you put on an App Store, where you need people to natively install an app. And so we realized this is not going to be profitable if we keep it this way. So we did a couple of big things there. We said, one, our original version of the app that we built, we'd outsourced the build on, because we weren't a tech company and we didn't know what we were doing. And we said, okay, well, we can either do one of two things. We can say, we can't do this, it's too expensive, we're not going to make any money. Or we can actually build a tech company inside of our company and really invest in this thing and build it ourselves and build it as a web app and change the economics around it. And we decided, okay, well, we're not taking any extra money for the next few years. Everything we make is going to be plowed back into growing the company, and that's what we did. Now, thankfully, you talked about at the beginning of this podcast, you quickly mentioned private equity. Thankfully, that bet paid off for us, and we grew the company incredibly quickly. We grew Upsiide incredibly quickly, and we were also lucky enough to find a fantastic private equity partner, Behringer, who we've now been working with for a year and a half, and that's been a fantastic experience as well. Love working with them. So,
how did that come about? Did they approach you? Did you approach them?
No, we went to a formal process. Yeah, we went to, we used Canaccord Genuity, and we did the whole formal process.
Were you, for this, were you worried at all just about disrupting yourself in any way?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the challenge that all of the large service players have had in this category. Like I mentioned, the Ipsos and the Cantars, and I have lots of friends in every research company, so I'm not going to badmouth anybody. But what I will say is that it's very challenging, even for us, to change the way that you service your companies and the way that people are used to being aligned with their clients, and also the way that they're compensated. And the bigger the company, the more challenge that is. And so I think we were at the right size, the right time. We were nimble enough that we could actually do this hybrid approach, whereas I think a lot of the bigger companies have really struggled doing the hybrid approach.
Talk about with Upsiide use cases. We could see here there's we're looking here, there's concept testing, message testing, creative testing, package design testing. What's a use case? I know you just did a study, but maybe we'll just talk about a use case that a company has used a platform, and then we can talk about like actually a recent one, real time, of what you actually just did. But what's an example of a use case that you've seen with the platform?
I mean, the majority of our use cases are tests. So again, like I said, with the swiping interface, it's about saying, okay, we're going to bring in this new flavor of chips, or we're going to bring in this new burger, or this new drink, or this new, whatever it happens to be, even a new claim or a new ad. And we want reactions to these things, and we want to know if people like them. We want to know of the options they're presented with, which ones do they like more or less. And then we want to know, if we introduce it into market, is it going to be incremental or cannibalistic to our existing portfolio? And so that's the lion's share of the use cases around Upsiide. But That's because we have unique capabilities in that area. But like I said, we also have all the other questions that you can ask that you would in any survey. So other use cases run the gamut from completely ad hoc, random questions that they have that they want to be able to quickly get a response from sort of overnight. People use it for tracking studies. People use it for, anything you can think you'd run a survey for. People use Upside to do.
And then it connects to, tell me a little bit, maybe get a little technical for a second. It connects to a database. So like someone would, from a self-service, they'd go in, upload a bunch of maybe product design images, and that just connects to a database. So do they get to choose how many responses, or how does it work on the back end then for the company?
Absolutely. So yeah, they'll go in and they'll set up their study, and they can use a template or they can build it from scratch. And they can have it serviced or they can do it on their own. And then they would go to an audience and create an audience. And we connect programmatically to a company called Lucid. Well, they were bought by Cint, so I don't know if it's still Lucid or Cint, but whatever. And so it's sort of like programmatic bidding on respondents to take your survey. So it goes out to, I think it's the total breadth of people who are connected to that programmatic database are around 30 million people globally. So we can run studies in 5-6 countries at the same time, as many languages, and that'll all be fulfilled usually within a night. Yeah.
So the companies that should be using this platform, obviously I could see CPG companies. What are other types of companies that tend to use your platform?
So banking, a lot, insurance. We've done a lot with online retailers. Yeah, it's sort of anybody. Basically, it's anybody who has anything they want to test as far as an innovation. So it doesn't have to be, I have a new product. It could be, I have like a series of benefits that I want to offer on a new credit card. It could be, I want to have a bunch of logos I want to test for a new, to redo my logo. I have a bunch of claims around, a service I want to test. Those would be more frequent use cases. Again, though, it could be anything that you can imagine you do in like SurveyMonkey. You could also do on Upside, but where we have the real advantages in testing and understanding the impact of adding new things.
Yeah, I kind of like picture, Tinder for your products or something. Right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Like,
that's obviously where the idea came.
I love it.
Yeah.
So talk about the study that you did, and why you did it. And if you want to, you could feel free to share your screen, because
Sure.
you just did this recently. So you're kind of going to do analyzing real time a little bit. So you haven't really totally processed the data in your mind, but just talk about the upside piece that you did.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and this is just sort of came out of you and I doing a really quick debrief before the podcast started and saying, what is there anything else interesting that will keep your audience interested? And I said, well, I did a study last night, our own, of our own accord, on our own dime, which is easy to do when you have your own platform and access to millions of respondents. You can run studies anytime you want. And I just ran it last night, and the data came back this morning. And so what I'll do really quickly first.
What motivated you to run this? Talk a little about what you ran, but why did you decide to run this survey?
I felt like there was questions that were not being answered related to this idea of corporations taking stances on social issues. And I'm actually slightly nervous about talking about it with you right now, because I didn't clear this with my partners. I don't know if anybody's going to get mad at me. And I feel like it's a slightly taboo subject, but I said I'm going to do it in as unbiased a way as I possibly
Well, that's
can.
the thing. It's like this is not necessarily, this isn't your opinion. You're gathering data here. So it's like, you're not even saying, here's my opinion on the subject. And that's kind of the beauty of your platform. It's not about opinion anymore. It's about, how do you support a decision with data? Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the nice part was at the end of the survey, I sort of said, does anybody have anything else they want to add? And I actually got quite a few thank yous for the survey from both people who consider themselves Republican and Democrat. So the truth is, people like to have their opinions heard, as long as the survey is done in a truly unbiased manner. So I'll just quickly show you the interface, just so you get a sense of what the people last night would have been, or yesterday. I'm in the UK, so it would have been like sort of noon, I guess, yesterday that we started this. So this survey is about how and when companies or brands should or should not take a stance on social issues. And I start with right away, do they feel like they're more Republican? Do they feel like they're more Democrat? Do they feel like they're in the middle? And then interestingly, do they feel that they're politically homeless? And then right away, have you ever boycotted a brand because of something that company brand did, said, or stood for? If I said yes.
The previous one, the first one with the Democrat or Republican, or, did you come up with those questions? Or
I did in this case.
You did, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
because it's an interesting question, like, do you feel politically homeless? Like, that's an interesting, maybe some people wouldn't even think to put that as an option, right?
I mean, the truth is, okay, so this is, in any survey design, no matter how hard you try to not have a bias, you can't help it. You can't help yourself that you have some sort of bias. And I firmly feel that I land here.
You relate to that one. Yeah,
I really relate to that. And so for me, that was like, okay, well, I wish that people put that in surveys, because I kind of feel like I don't subscribe to any one, all issues from one camp. I just don't. I just think there's too many things are completely different. And interestingly here, I think you pretty much get the divide that you kind of expect. It sort of aligns with what I've been seeing recently in polls in terms of like, Republican leaning Republican versus leaning Democrat or Democrat. But what you don't see in those polls is the 33% of people, or almost 34% of people, say either I feel politically homeless or I'm in the middle. And so a third of the population, and this is 1,000 Americans, so this is a good sample, a full third of people kind of say, I don't know where I sit anymore. The world has become too divided, and I kind of liked being able to go to Thanksgiving and not get in a fight.
That's the fun of Thanksgiving. Come on.
Right. So this to me is really fascinating. And then I said, have you ever boycotted or stopped buying a brand because of something the company brand did or said or stood for? 45% of people said that they had. Like that's a really high number. And I don't know if people realize the risk. I'm not saying that you shouldn't stand for something. That's not for me to decide. But I do think
there's repercussions.
I think the data we've seen has underplayed the risk profile of that behavior. And I think there was also a belief that this was solely the purview of one side of the political spectrum. And if I filter this data, so one of the cool things you can do in Upside is you can go in and take any question that was asked in the survey and filter it. And so let's say we think, okay, well, I think this is mostly going to be a Democrat behavior. And if I say, okay, I lean Republican or I am Republican, 48% of them say they have boycotted something. So it's not just one side of the aisle that's
yeah. So you can see overall how many boycotted, but then you can kind of segment it based on whatever the survey results were. If someone leaned, if someone was Republican, if someone leaned Democrat, was Democrat.
Right. And I could also say, what about the people who are in the middle or homeless, which I think is very similar. Much less of them. No surprise. If I don't know how I feel about subjects, then I'm less likely to take action. But still 36%. And so why I think 36% is an important number, even among those people who sit in the middle, is because if I go down here and I ask, have you ever, so that's people who've stopped buying something because they didn't like a stance. If I say, have you ever specifically bought a product because they said something you liked about a political issue, that's only 31%. Now, 31% is still a lot. But my point is It's not like one stance is going to get you there. Like, I'm against murder. Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone is uniformly, I guess, against the concept. Everyone can agree, hopefully, that murder is bad. I'm
normal people, yes.
Yes, I'm anti-murder. Or even let's make it even more extreme. I'm anti-serial killer. I'm against serial killers. If we knew that everybody who agreed with that would buy it and nobody would boycott it, okay, that's good. You've got a winning social issue. But what we're seeing is that there's such a divide in terms of the percentage of people who are one party or the other that I don't know if there is such a thing. I mean, with the exception of maybe being anti-serial, we hope.
So some of the other questions that you asked in the survey.
What brands have they specifically bought? Because so we actually asked some, specific, like you said you did. What's one you bought because they said, I think this is supposed to be Nike. People don't, Nike. I love to wear the shoes, but they're not really saying the specific issue here. But do you think that every company or brand needs to or should explain their stance on social issues? And so again, we see that a similar divide, about 70% of people saying no, at least some brands or companies should just stay out of social issues. And I think this is completely antithetical to what we see in, magazine after magazine, like, HBR, Forbes. They'll come out and they'll say, you need to take a stand. And I think we're getting to a world where a lot of people are saying, well, not every brand has to take. Base cell margarine doesn't need to stand.
It's a good question. I mean, if stuff comes out in the media, should brands take a stance, right? That's the question.
Right.
And they probably have an advisor, I imagine a PR advisor, telling them one way or the other, and then what to say on it.
Right. And I was reading an article just this morning trying to get some background on this, and it said the majority of CEOs actually self-identify as Republican, but the majority of companies are seen that, or the causes they support are potentially seen as left-wing. So they're dealing with, or Democratic. Or Democrat, I should say. And many of the things that they're dealing with, like even internally, they have struggles. And I just don't know if it's as clear cut as we've sort of pretended that it is, that you should just always take a stand. I don't know if you should. And if you don't know if you should, then maybe you shouldn't, because you don't even know if you stand for it. I just don't think the data is as clear cut as the story has been made out to be, that everyone should. And even here, like now obviously this is going to change again. Let's just look at Democrats here. That number does go up, right? So Democrats, people who lean Democrat, almost 40% of them feel that every brand should take a stand. It's still the minority though. We're still over 60% of them saying no.
They want to know where people stand, pretty much.
Yes.
These particular people.
Yeah. And then, why. And the good thing about open ends and upside, we can do all these, the regular stuff like, word clouds. But we can also do keywords, and we can look through positive and negative sentiment around those keywords, and we can see, what are people saying.
So companies will use this in their messaging or take it out of their messaging according to what they find here. Oh yeah. I mean, this is obviously a lot easier to interpret when it's just like, do you like this new version of this box of pasta, right? Like if you, we just did that just recently. That was a study we just did. Why do you like this box of pasta? What do you dislike about the box of pasta? And then you get keywords around, I don't like the color. I don't like the window, whatever it happens to be. That it's very clear. In this case, we're looking at a little bit more nuance because this is just, a sort of a more general study. Would you refuse to buy a brand? So it's one thing to say, should everybody stand for something? It's another thing to say, would you actually not buy something if they didn't take a stand? And now that number goes from, before we were saying, let's say about 30% of people said everybody should.
But the percentage of people who then actually, you drop another 6% if you say, would you actually basically boycott a brand for not taking it? And now
Right.
you're down to 24%. So
That's
that
still higher than I would have expected, personally.
I think I think there's two things going on. I mean, one is it's stated versus actual behavior. So, I mean,
Yeah.
people tend to overstate things that they'll do. Like every year I say I'm going to drink more water and drink less alcohol, and every year I drink way too much alcohol the second day of January. But I think it's that, but it's also compounded by the fact that if you read the stories in the media, you would assume this number would be significantly higher, because the advice is always, you must take a stand. No one gets to be in the middle. Nobody gets to fenced in anymore. I just don't think that the data supports that argument. I think you can, you know. I'm not saying
Yeah.
you should. I'm just saying you can.
Right.
Yeah. Then here's that swiping exercise. So this is a good illustration of that. So the way that I let me get so I basically said, if you feel positively about this brand, swipe right. If you feel negatively about the brand, swipe left. And then when you've been shown a couple of brands that you feel positively about, then I want you to say, which of those two do you feel more positively about? So a very simple, like, brand affinity. That's not the exact wording I used. That was more concise than that. But it's a basic measure of brand affinity. And you have to also consider the context in which this happened. And so I just wanted to understand, how do people feel about some of the biggest, most well-known brands? And then we get this idea score, which is a combination of how many times people swipe right, plus how many times people chose it in a head-to-head. And we end up with this composite score that we have a whole white paper around. It says that's predictive of, when it comes to choice, predictive market share. In this case, it's affinity. And we can begin to say, okay, so if this is how much affinity I have towards these brands, how much would that really change based on political affiliation? Like, you would say, okay, well, if some of these brands are seen as more left, more right, or more left, would something as simple as political affiliation have a major impact on that? And so, we can see, for instance, that if I look at those people who lean more right, Chick-fil-A, the filtered group is the dark, the darker bar. Chick-fil-A suddenly jumps up to being the second most liked brand.
Yeah.
Because it's highly right.
Yeah, exactly.
At least in their perception.
Yeah.
And then, some Twitter does a little better, or X, whatever we want to call it.
Right.
Bud Light does worse. I mean, it's kind of what you would potentially expect. And then there's some brands that just sort of barely move, right?
It's really interesting. I mean, I guess, companies can use this if, like, let's say they find, Republican, whatever, Tesla, is Republicans, all, large percent view Tesla, then they could start marketing to more Republican lists or something like that.
That's one way to look at it. But I think, yes, I think that absolutely you could lean into it, or you could say, so here I asked the question right out. I said, for each of the brands, please indicate if you think they're more Republican, more Democrat, or in the middle, meaning they have no political leaning. And so the first thing I want to do here is just sort on Republican. So those brands that were seen most affiliated with Republicans were Chick-fil-A, X, Tesla. All of this is because of Elon Musk, obviously. Then Ford Motor Company. I think that's just sort of, built Ford tough. This sort of, their positioning is sort of more rugged, hard work, rugged blue collar. The Home Depot, right? Then the banks, and then if we go all the way to the other extreme, if we say more Democrat, if I filter on that or sort on that, this I did find a little surprising. So the company seen most skewing left is actually Disney, more than even Bud Light. And then the third highest is actually Starbucks. And then when I looked back at the people who said they were boycotting a company, if I filter that on Democrats, a lot of them are boycotting Starbucks. So they've really got themselves in a catch-22 here, which is that they're seen as leaning one way, but they're not agreeing with everything that side potentially believes in. And now they're caught in the middle with no faith.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really dangerous. So I guess what I'm saying is again, this is my interpretation. The data is here to speak for itself. But if you lean one way or the other, that's fine. I think where you run into danger is, here we see Bud Light now is seen as being the second most left brand of the 22 brands I selected here. Pre the controversy, would have seen probably as extremely right-wing.
Right.
Now seen as extremely left-wing, and you get caught in the middle without any rabid fans. And so I think the same thing might, theoretically, Starbucks is in danger of that same outcome, just in the other direction.
Things can shift, right?
Yeah.
I mean, things can shift fast with social media as well.
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous game. I'm not, like I said, I see myself as politically homeless. I'm not betting on any horse in this game. I'm just saying, from a strictly brand management, fiscal responsibility point of view, I think the argument that there's no risk involved is spurious.
Yeah, it's super interesting. No, thanks for sharing that. And, just how Upside works, but how you can collect data, make decisions, is really interesting. So,
Thanks.
I'm curious, we talked about the evolution of the service, from the agency side to the SaaS side. I'd love to hear a little bit about the evolution of the team, right? How it started, and now you have, a large staff.
Yeah, I think as we grew, particularly as we grew the SaaS side of the business, there's so much to learn. Moving, right away we were competing with SaaS companies who'd started as SaaS, and so the Vision Criticals and the Zappies and a bunch of other companies, and so they were already set up to be in the traditional SaaS model, right? They had like product managers and design and developers, and then they had customer success and support and sales. And our model is different, and so we kind of have to partly staff up some of those functions that would be more traditionally SaaS, and then also find hybrid ways of delivering some of the other services and value, which is tricky because there's no known model for it. I mean, people have made arguments that there's certain companies that we can use as models, but even the ones that they say often don't seem to have it all figured out. So whereas the SaaS companies seem to have really figured it out, like that's how they're able to scale to like $1 billion+ so quickly, is because it's like they follow this playbook of this is how you structure the company, these are the roles that people play, and then we just sell as much as we can. And so we have definitely had to staff up. So Frank Byrne leads the tech side of our company, and he did a fantastic job of growing a dev team from zero, and using methodologies like Shape Up to drive our cycles so that we could be really quick and agile in our development. I mean, just so much to learn. Everything from how do you build your own product, how do you price your own product, how do you sell it, how do you set up a sales team that's very different from a sales team for selling consulting services, how do you set up a support team, how do you set up a support desk, how do you get a ticketing system working. None of those things apply to consulting. So it was about growing a bunch of new functions in addition to figuring out how to build software and scale software. It wasn't easy. Yeah.
Not easy at all.
No.
You know, I'm wondering how private equity changed your company, your role.
Well, it's only been a year and a half. Um, I think they, private equity, it can be challenging, but it's challenging in a really good way, which is that um, they tend to be very metrics focused. They really hold you accountable on those metrics in a way that when you're running the company yourself and you're not beholden to a board of directors or to private equity firm shareholders, you don't do. And so that's not to say it's not without some difficulty, because you want to be able to say, oh, well, I just thought this was a good idea.
Right.
And that's not going to fly with private equity. Why do you think it's a good idea? What's your proof? What research have you done? And so
Luckily, you're in
is
a research-based industry, so you're probably used to it more than most. So
a little bit, but you still make quick decisions and stuff if you need to, if you're an agile company. And thankfully, and I'm not just sucking up here because I guess that's something people would be apt to do, but I'm not. I mean, we chose carefully the private equity partner that we went with, and Behringer was Canadian based, and the founders had like varied backgrounds. They weren't just finance guys; they'd also like run agencies, and so they really understand the strategic side of things as well as just like the dollars and cents. So it wasn't just an exercise of like, they bought us and then it was like, let's just cut to the bottom line. It was like, okay, what's your strategy? Where do you think the growth is coming from? How is it going to come from there? And challenging us in a good way. So I think it's just added a lot more structure and rigor to the way that we're running the company, which is, I think, a good way to, if you're growing, and particularly if you're growing in an environment that's getting more challenging by the month, it's good to have that rigor.
Ian, first of all, thank you for sharing your journey, your knowledge. It is fascinating what you do at Dig Insights and also Upside. My last question is just some of your favorite resources. It could be books. It could be maybe mentors that have helped you. What are some of your favorite resources that you've learned from throughout the years?
Oh, I jump around a lot. And I follow a few people on LinkedIn that I really think are really smart. Lately I've been reading a lot of stuff that Jason Lumpkin writes from SaaSter. I think he's really dialed in. He understands what's going on in SaaS, and he understands what strategies are working and aren't working. So I think lately I've been just reading a ton of his stuff, including a book that he wrote, which was from, I think it was from impossible to probable, or inevitable.
Yeah, I think he's Jason Lumpkin is the one he sold Echo Sign to Adobe or something like that.
Yeah, and he sits on the board. He was sitting on the board of HubSpot. And, and he runs SaaSter, which is that giant conference. So
from really, impossible to inevitable.
That's what it is. It's So I read that book a while ago. So I've been taking a lot from him lately. There, I jump around. I get onto and then I just sort of read everything that person's written, and then I move on to who's. I mean, there was a time when I was following Gary Vee, and then I just got tired of that, and it kind of moves around. But right now,
you're in your like SaaS, like you're just deep in SaaS right now.
I'm deep in SaaS right now.
Yeah,
deep into what he has to say. Yeah,
cool. First of all, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone should check out your website. Check out Dig Insights. We saw the screen obviously with Upside and more episodes of the podcast. And Ian, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Dr. Weiss. Thanks.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.